I'm Ripski, and I've been asked to do a few drunken instructional videos for YouTube. So this is the part one of what should be a very kind of quick introduction to drunken boxing. The first thing that you need to understand in drunken kung fu is that in order to do things so backwards, which is we'll get into later, you have to kind of understand orthodox Chinese martial arts first. So the first thing you need to start out with is some really nice, easy orthodox stances and techniques to work with. So we'll start off with a couple of the basic stances that you'd learn in any other kung fu school. First off, of course, is horse riding stance. So the horse riding stance, to measure it for your body, you would bring your toes out, heels out, toes out to about 45, and then just set yourself up into a 90-degree angle with the feet so that they're parallel, pointed straight ahead. Then, obviously, sit down as though you were riding a horse, even though that's actually a really terrible translation for Mabu. In a southern system, you would want to be at a 90-degree angle with the knees. Since this drunken is a northern system, we're going to do northern style stances. You need to have a bit of an angle on the leg. Somewhere like 30 to 45 degrees, somewhere in here. Feet pointed straight ahead, weight 50-50 on each leg, and the back nice and straight, which we're going to go into in more depth afterwards. Horse riding stance. This is a really good one when you get started to get your legs stronger. You should be able to hold this, at first you'll be able to hold this for maybe 20 or 30 seconds. Ideally, you're going to be looking for 3 to 5 minutes to kind of have a really good base. Other than that, you can continue on going for longer and longer periods, but to get yourself started, go for maybe a 3-minute goal. Okay, so that's the horse riding stance, Ma Bu. Now, the second one, which is a normal kung fu fighting stance, is a bow and arrow stance. Sometimes it's called a gong mu. In gong mu, you just step straight back and over and settle into the stance. Both feet pointing approximately straight ahead. 60% of your weight on your front leg. Guards up in front. Back nice and straight. Knee bent, as you can kind of see here, so that the bone in the lower leg is completely 90 degrees from the floor. It's very important because this stance, one of its weakest attributes is that the knee is very, very close to the opponent. So if the knee is hit and it's in a position like this, the knee will just break or it'll buckle at very least. At this level, if I hit my knee, it's going to drive the power down into my floor here. And that's what you want to have. You want to have a power transfer rather than a power driving through your knee joint. If you go any further forward, you're okay until you can't see your toes anymore. If you go to something like this, and you can't see your toes, what's happening is the knee, which is a weight transference joint, becomes a weight bearing joint. And as soon as the knee begins to bear weight, then what's happening is that the meniscus in the knee is going to be damaged. Not today, but in time. If you practice Kung Fu for a long time, months or years, you'll slowly deteriorate your knees. And a lot of Kung Fu stylists end up with knee problems because of just simple little things like that. Not thinking about it, or never being told, hey, you got to be able to see your toes. Okay, so that's the second stance. Third stance we're going to use is just crane stance, which is used in all of the kicking drills. Crane stance is very simply standing up on one leg. Bring one knee up, guards up. The knee should be at least a 90-degree angle. Higher is better. It's harder work. Kung Fu means sustained effort in order to acquire a skill. So the harder the work, the better it is for you, the more benefits you're going to derive from it. Crane stance is a really nice ready stance. It's also used for blocking. Okay, so anybody kicking your groin or your lower leg. Sometimes you can just lift the leg up and block. Crane stance. Alright. Cat stance. This is the most often used stance in the style of drunken that I practice. And Mabu, cat stance, is a very small, cat-like, funny enough, stance. 90% of the weight on the back leg, 10% on the front, with the toe touching the ground very gently. Okay? 10% of your weight though, not 0, not 1%, 10%. There's some weight there, okay? But it should be extremely easy to pick up the leg. If, and this is a nice easy test, I have too much weight on the front leg, when I go to pick my leg up, my body will back up in order to do it. This sends a signal to my opponent. If I were trying to throw a kick from a cat stance, and if he's intelligent and well-trained, he's going to see my body back up. He's going to know that something's going on with the legs. Almost anybody instinctively will know it anyway. You might get away with somebody that's really drunk or totally not watching, but no good. Illegal. Don't do that. So 90%, 10%. The rear foot out at a 45 degree, not a full 90, because it creates stress on the knee again, a twisting motion that isn't acceptable. 45, the knee should be nice and relaxed, it should feel good. 10% there, 90 in the back. This is the most often used stance in Drunken. Now those are the orthodox methods, meaning a traditional normal Kung Fu school teaching a northern or maybe even a southern style. That'll be okay. But Drunken tends to do things, well, really weird. So we need to take and create a structure before we break it. Now the most important part of this structural training is going to be the alignment of your spine. So in traditional orthodox systems, sometimes it's called stand tall like the monkey. And what that means is you're trying to get the spine erect. Now you've heard this lots of times, lots of Tai Chi guys talk about it. Oh, extend the head up as though you were being suspended by a string. Tuck under the tailbone, maybe you've heard. There's lots of things that allude to stand tall like the monkey. So I'm just going to kind of go over it quickly and try to kind of give you the major points in it. There's three major acupressure or acupuncture points that are used in stand tall like the monkey. The first one is Bai Hui, which is at the very top of your head where the swirl of hair takes place, okay? This point must be pointed straight up. Now when I'm standing here normally talking to you, my head is actually slightly tilted backwards in order for my eyes to be level. If I tuck in my chin and extend my neck as though suspended by a string from Bai Hui now points straight up or directly to heaven, suspending me from the top of my head. So that's the first major point. The second point is called Dai Joy. Dai Joy, if you reach back and find the C7 vertebrae, which is kind of the big lump on your spine, on your upper spine, Dai Joy is just underneath that. And what you hear here in things like Tai Chi classics are sink the chest and pluck up the back, which is kind of a crappy translation for a lot of people, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But what it's kind of trying to say is that I get my Bai Hui aligned, and then I sink the chest and try to get Dai Joy to pull out so that I create a line from Bai Hui straight down to Dai Joy. Now, the third point is Ming Men, which is in your lower back, right in the curvature of the lower back. Ming Men, in our normal spinal curve, will be in. What we want to do is we want to gently pull Ming Men out so that the rest of the spine sort of sits upon itself as though it were a pillar. Now, it's not going to be perfectly straight. It's going to have small arches and still, inside there. But you don't want it to be in your normal curvature because it's just not the most efficient use of your spine when trying to create and transfer force. So you want Ming Men to be pulled out. So if I really exaggerate, I'm going to tuck the tailbone under and bring Ming Men, which is right around here by the kidneys, outwards. Sink the chest to get Dai Joy out, and tuck in the chin to get Bai Hui pointed straight up. So that I've got a very, very erect back. Okay? Now the fourth point technically that's I haven't talked about yet is Hui Yin. Hui Yin is in the perineum, okay, which is right between the genitals and the anus. And the perineum, or Hui Yin, cannot point forward. When people talk about tucking the tailbone, a lot of people overcompensate and they really tuck it under like this, and it points forward. And it just doesn't work properly. You want to have that pillar-like structure so that it's straight up and down. Pillars, as we can all agree, we build buildings with them because they transfer force effectively. So we're trying to make our spine like a pillar. Now there's more to this. The spine should not be resting upon itself, each vertebrae in the line, as though it were a pillar. The string analogy, pulling from the top, that should actually try to separate the vertebrae just a little bit so that you get a nice, open, easy feeling in the spine. Okay, now this is orthodox structure. All of the stances we did earlier would be a part of that. But Drunken structure, now that we've got that going on, we'll break it. Drunken structure is, while similar, not exactly the same. It's called the bare back, or the drunken back sometimes. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to take Bai Hui, point it to the ceiling, point it to heaven. Dai Joy is going to be pulled back, but it's going to be quite extended. If a normal stand tall like the monkey is somewhere in here, a drunken version, up in the chest, would be much more extended. The bare back, if you think about a bear and its anatomy, it's much more rounded. The very last part is to, instead of having Hui Yin point downwards, tuck the tailbone under like I just told you not to. Thanks a lot.